Hi, I'm Jason Sanders, and welcome to the second video in my two-part series where I show you how to create a Microsoft Azure function. In the first video, part one, I went through the various software programs that you needed to download and install, and some applications that you need to create accounts with in order to set the proper environment. Now, in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to actually create the Microsoft Azure function. And once you create this function, or this function will ping the OpenAI API and allow you to integrate ChatGPT functions into various apps or that are on the market, or even apps that you might create from scratch. So let's get started. I'm going to remove my head here so it doesn't get in the way. And the first thing that I'm going to do is fire up Visual Studio Code. And you can see I've opened up an empty folder called ChatGPT API. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to fire up the Azure extension. Now, when you do this for the first time, it may prompt you to sign in to your Azure account. I'm already signed in, so it's not doing that. And what I'm going to do next is down here in the workspace, I'm going to create a function, and it's going to be in this Visual Studio Code environment, and I can work with it before pushing it to my online Microsoft Azure account. So I'm going to click on Create Function, and I'm going to select this folder, ChatGPT API folder. Language will be Python 3.9.13. It's going to be HTTP trigger, the template for the function. And let's call this ChatGPT API. And we're going to make it anonymous. And it's creating a function, Azure function, in our local Visual Studio Code environment. Okay, it's finished. So whenever you create a Azure function, it'll initially create this boilerplate code, which is very simple. Basically, what it's doing is you're passing in a name here, and what you're getting back is this sentence: "Hello, whatever name you input. This HTTP triggered function executed successfully." So what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is modify this so it interacts with the OpenAI API and allows you to get responses, ChatGPT responses. So the first thing I'm going to do is delete some of this code that we don't need, because we're not interested in just passing in a name and getting that name back. So let me delete this here. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is import the OpenAI library. So I'm going to go import OpenAI. And whenever you import a library, you need it to add it to this requirements document for it to work. So I'm going to enter in OpenAI, go back to the init file, and I've imported the OpenAI library. And the next thing is I need to provide it my secret key. And secret key equals. Now, if you remember, you can generate these secret keys in the API section of your account, your ChatGPT account. So you need a ChatGPT account to generate a secret key, which will then allow you to interact with the API. So I'm going to copy and paste my secret key here. Now, don't use this one because after I create this video, it's no longer going to work. So you're going to need to generate your own key. But for now, this will work for us. Okay, so I've typed in my secret key here, and what I'm going to do next is go down here, and I need to give OpenAI my secret key, my key to authenticate. So this is where I pass this key over to OpenAI so it can authenticate and give me a response to my prompt. So to do that, you type OpenAI API key equals secret key. Okay. Now next, we want to get variables from HTTP request body. In other words, we're going to pass in a request to ultimately to ChatGPT, and we want to have some code that passes that information to it or to this function, which will then pass it to OpenAI API. So rec body, request body equals get JSON. Okay. And next, what we need to do is actually call the OpenAI API and pass the arguments or pass the information to it. And this is a little bit more involved. So output equals OpenAI chat completion create. Now, just as an quick aside, this block of code here is for the GPT 3.5 Turbo model and possibly above. It won't work for the DaVinci model. They changed, well, you'll see they changed prompt to messages in the 3.5 Turbo model. So model equals rec body model messages. This used to be prompts in the DaVinci model, but now it's called messages. X tokens. Okay, and then so tokens, if you're not aware, that's where you can adjust the length of the response that you get from ChatGPT. And the reason why you might want to do that is to cut down on costs, because over time you're going to incur more costs if you get lengthy responses. And sometimes you don't need a lengthy response. And then temperature. Rec body Then temperature is how you can adjust the creativity level of ChatGPT, the response that it gives you. Okay, I think that's it. And then we need to format the response that we get from the OpenAI API or ChatGPT. Format response. And to do that, let's do output text equals output choices 0 dot message.content. Okay. And then finally, this is going to return our response. And let's see. Let's delete this. This will be output text. Then we can just tidy this up a bit. Status code. And I think that's it. Yeah, so we just made these modifications to the code. And let's go back to Azure. And let's test this in a local environment. Actually, I need to go back to init py and fire it up in a local environment. So I'm just going to simply press F5. Let's move this up a little bit. And it worked. And so to test this, we'll go to Azure. We'll go down to our local workspace, and we should see the function here, and we do. And I'm just going to test this locally to see if it's working properly, if it's actually pinging the OpenAI API and getting a response from ChatGPT. So let's execute the function now. And I already created a prompt or a body to plug in. Let me just copy this so I don't have to take a whole lot of time to type it out because it's a little bit lengthy. Go back to Studio Code and I'm just going to paste it here. So here you can see I'm passing in model here, GPT-3.5 Turbo, and messages. If you go over here, content is what in previous models was prompt. So it's the prompt that I'm providing is give me 5 titles for a strawberry marketing campaign, max tokens 200 and temperature of 0. So I'm just going to send that, and this function is then going to ping the OpenAI API and hopefully get a response from ChatGPT. Okay, excellent. It worked. I'm going to maximize this a bit and look at that. We got 5 responses from ChatGPT for possible titles for a strawberry marketing campaign. And let's try it again, and then maybe let's change the prompt change the prompt a little bit. So execute function now. Give me 5 titles for a luxury car marketing campaign. And let's see what happens. So that worked. Oops. Maximize that. So we got 5 different responses for a luxury car marketing campaign. Okay, great. So we've created a function. It's working. It's successfully pinging the OpenAI API, and we're getting a response. But it's just running locally on our machine right now. And we need to push that to Microsoft Azure. So to do that, click on Azure Functions and create a function app in Azure. So we're going to create a new function app in Azure, and we need to create a new name. So let's call it OpenAI API 43323. Let's hope that works. Okay. And then Python 3.9, East US, and it's working on it. So I'm going to pause the video for a minute while it's doing this so you don't have to wait. Okay, so that worked. After one failed attempt, it ended up creating it. And next, we want to deploy the function to that app. So we just created a function app, and now we want to deploy this function that we just created to the app. So let me click on Deploy Function App, and OpenAI API 2354. Select that. Are you sure you want to deploy? Yes, deploy. And I'm going to pause the video again so you don't have to wait for that. Let me pause. Okay, so it successfully deployed. The deployment is completed. And so let's check that in Microsoft Azure. So let me go to Microsoft Azure, and let me move this out of the way. And let's go to Function App, and we should see yes, here we go. So OpenAI API 2354 has been deployed. I'm going to click on it and go down, and let's hopefully we see our function there. Yes, ChatGPT API function is here. So I'm going to click on that. And so essentially we successfully deployed our function to a function app in Azure. Let's click on Code and Test. And hopefully, yes. So we see the code that I just entered into my Visual Studio Code. And the final thing is to test to see if this is actually working. And I'm going to use Postman to do that. So let me click here, get function URL. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go to an app in the previous video that I requested you create a free account. Let me remove my head here a second. And this is Postman. And so what you want to do is create a new collection, and the resource would be test. I think that's what it's called, resource. Yeah, create a new request. So I created a new collection called API, and then I created a new request in API called test. And so you want to do that, and then you come over here and paste in the URL of the Azure function that we just created. And this Azure function pings the OpenAI API. And what I'm going to do here is much like what I showed you earlier when running in the local Visual Studio Code environment. This is all on the web now. And I'm going to paste in that same body request. Let me go to my notepad here. So I'm going to copy and oops, that's not what I want. go back to Postman and paste that here. And I'm going to turn it into a JSON so I can format it a little bit better. So again, if you remember, this is the same body request that I used when testing this function locally in Visual Studio Code. And what I'm going to do is just format this a little bit so you can see it better. Messages, max tokens, oops, messages. Max tokens and temperature. And move this down here. So model, messages, max tokens, and temperature. And so give me 5 titles for a strawberry marketing campaign. So this is the body, again, that I'm passing to the Azure function. The Azure function's then going to pass that to the OpenAI API, get a response from ChatGPT, and then this response will be shown down here. The response from ChatGPT will be shown down here if everything's working correctly. So let's hit send, sending the request, and there we go. We have the response from ChatGPT for the 5 titles for a strawberry marketing campaign. Now let's try with something else. 5 titles for a, let's see, for a mystery novel set in Victorian England. Give me 5 titles for a mystery novel set in Victorian England. So let's see what we get back with that. And yes, we got something different. So that's it. Basically, you can use this Azure function, this URL, and you can plug it into certain apps out there that allow for it. And what you can do is then integrate that app that allows you to, put this URL API in and ping ChatGPT and embed it or incorporate it into your app. So it's very powerful, and hopefully this video helped. And in some later videos, what I'll do is I'll actually show you that next step. So for example, if you create an app in something like Bubble, or even your own app that you create from scratch, how you can use this Azure function, this URL, to integrate your app with ChatGPT. So again, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next time.